Ron, you've been sweating in here all day. Are you drinking any fluids?
Yes, plenty.
What's up, guys, gals, and my they-them pals? The Last of Us is 3 episodes strong now, and I gotta say, I've really been enjoying this show. I definitely didn't expect to make a video based on the first episode, and I definitely didn't expect to make a video based on the third. Realistically, I was just gonna talk about the whole show when it was done, but so far, it's been so good that I've wanted to talk to you guys about it. And so far, I'm convinced episode 3 has been the best thing this show has put out. One of the really great aspects of this show is it tries to get into the theme of purpose. A lot of the characters in this story have already lost somebody or someone who is very important to them, and they don't feel like they have any purpose or real reason to be alive anymore. Purpose is what keeps these people moving. Without any actual rhyme or reason to stay alive, they're just surviving. And when we meet up with our characters, they've been doing it for a really long time. In this episode, we follow Nick Offerman as Bill, who's basically just Ron Swanson if he survived the apocalypse. Because realistically, I would fully expect Ron Swanson to steal a town and booby trap the fuck out of it. It's totally something that man would do. Bill isolates himself from the world and everything else around him because he wants to stay safe and survive. And that's where he originally differs from the idea of purpose. He's just surviving. He makes it 3 years on his own before Frank stumbles into his life, but after that, he's found his sense of purpose. One of my favorite lines from this episode was, "I wasn't afraid until you showed up." Bill just letting Frank know that he wasn't worried about anything until he loved somebody and knew he had to protect them. When he just had to worry about himself, he wasn't worried at night. He's on edge, he's scared, he doesn't want to lose his partner. The both of them find a greater meaning to their lives when they find each other. They both really needed each other. And this all parallels really well with Joel and Ellie. Without Sarah, Joel's only sense of purpose was Tess, and now that she's gone, the only thing he can do is help Ellie. And Ellie has no one. Her purpose is to try and find a cure. I actually think Game Bill is a perfect example of Bill if he didn't have any purpose. And in the game, he lost Frank. They got into an argument, Frank got bit and hanged himself. Like, they didn't end on good terms. But in the show, I really loved his character. Not that I dislike him from the original game or any of the storylines that they set up, but they really took Bill and Frank and overly expanded on it. This episode is beautiful, and probably one of the best episodes of anything I have ever seen in my life. It will 100% go down as one of my favorite TV show episodes. This episode did an excellent job at keeping me incredibly hooked throughout the entire thing. I had a few people complaining to me that it was really slow, and at that point I'm just really confused. This episode wasn't supposed to be fast-paced zombie action. Realistically, this show hasn't been much of that at all. It's a very slow burn to what it wants you to learn, and I loved this episode. It taught the viewers about purpose and love in a really heartwarming and heartbreaking way. We don't really know much about Frank, but it's pretty clear that Bill's never really loved anybody before. He's never really had a sense of purpose or anybody in his life besides himself. It's the reason he survived and got to stay in the town. He hid underground in a bunker that he had already prepared for a scenario like this. In his mind, he was destined to be alone. That's where Frank saves him. I can't talk about this episode without talking about the phenomenal acting performances from both Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett. Genuinely some of the best acting I've ever seen. Nick Offerman really steals the show though. I've never seen him in such a dramatic role. I don't cry very often when I'm watching TV or movies, and it really has to try to get my strings to be like, oh man, and I have to give out, but I couldn't even hold back. This episode had me in tears. It was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. I wasn't sad, but I wasn't happy. It was a very bittersweet ending. Both of these actors brought these characters alive throughout this entire episode, and they did so well. Throughout the hour, we learn about two characters, watch them spend their lives together, and pass. And it's incredibly touching. Once we meet up with our characters in 2023, they're a lot older, almost in shambles compared to how we last saw them. It contrasts from scenes prior of Frank taking care of Bill to Bill taking care of Frank. Frank stitching up and healing Bill after being shot in the torso, and Bill pushing around old little Frank in a wheelchair. It's clear as soon as we get to 2023 that Frank's pretty much done with his life. One of the first scenes we see of him is him painting, and he kind of just gives up. He gets frustrated. He stops painting. His body isn't what it used to be, and it's become more and more of a pain of him to just move it around. After the long life he's had, he talks to Bill and decides that today was going to be his last day, that he wanted to spend the greatest day with him, get married, and go to sleep and not wake up. Which leads to probably, again, one of the best performances I've ever fucking witnessed. Nick Offerman shows so much emotion throughout this episode, and it's so clear that these characters love each other. I thought I was only going to be crying for that scene, but I was almost crying for the whole end duration of the episode. Bittersweet is exactly how to describe the ending of this. Although it's sad that Frank decided that it's his time to go, what's incredibly sweet and heartwarming about it is Bill wasn't not gonna go with him. He doesn't see a purpose to his life without Frank. He didn't before Frank showed up. He was, again, just surviving. But now that our character has found his sense of purpose, he's not gonna leave that. He's gonna go with it, and it's beautiful. It's truly so good. I've probably said something along those lines like 1,000 times throughout this entire video, but I do not fucking care. I will shout it from the rooftops. Fucking love The Last of Us, and I loved this episode. The last thing I want to talk about is the note that Ellie reads to Joel from Bill at the end. Bill talks about how you have to keep the people you love close to you, and that he'd do anything he could to protect Frank, and anything he could to stay with him. Purpose is important for the human mind, and for anybody in general. He talks about how he has respect for Joel. They're both very similar characters, and it makes sense that they would get along. They never were really friends, but they had a mutual respect because of the two people they are. They're both loners. Whether they became that way or were already like that. But it's not until people come in their lives that they're able to change that habit. Bill didn't like the world. He was glad when everybody died. But when Frank showed up, he saved him. And he sees that in Joel. He sees a man who can save the people he cares about. That's why Bill respects him. In the letter, Bill's talking about Tess. It parallels with the fact that Tess just died in the last episode. Although the note is written about how Joel needs to protect the ones he cares about, it parallels with the fact that he's with Ellie now. He ends up realizing in this moment, just a little bit, that he needs to protect her. He needs to save her, and he can't just let her die. And he especially can't lose her now that he doesn't have Tess. Jesus Christ, I wish I could rank this episode or give it a rating or some shit, because it's phenomenal. I think I'm just gonna give this episode a big kiss. I will always appreciate it for presenting to me some of the best storytelling I've ever seen. In about an hour, we are introduced to characters, we watch them grow old, and we watch them die. And this whole episode has already been more entertaining than the entire show, on a completely different level. Maybe I'll do more Last of Us videos before the season ends, but realistically, I don't think I'm going to come back to this topic until season 1's over. I don't see me talking about every other episode like this. This one just needed to get its own designated video. This episode felt like its own little side story, and me and my brother both agreed that we could sit there and watch these characters without even it being a part of The Last of Us. As always, like, subscribe, and save Norbit now.